This video is specifically in response to a question I got back on video number 56 when I first taught knife hand block, Stoke. I was mostly concerned with getting the hands right, getting the arm positions, but within that video you can still see that as I sit into the stance, there's a settling of the hip, a locking of the gamaku or core area. As the hip settles, the core locks into place, causing what Heiher Sensei likes to call the trunchial rotation. I love that term, because it's not the same as, for example, in Shotokan, there's sort of a whip, return, whip motion, which is sort of a counter pull in Shotokan and typically done in their kokutsudachi, back stance this way with the arm extended. So my hip is already forward, then the hip pulls and sort of settles back and away, pulling away from the block this way in the Shotokan system. In Taekwondo, you'll see the big arm movement. Again, the same kokutsudachi back stance here, but with a large arm prep movement. In Kishabajiku, Shorin-ryu, which is an offshoot of the Matsubayashi system, you'll see a definite, very intentional, and usually in Nekodachi, a really very intentional hip shake before they go into each move. In Seidokan, the concept of the koshi has more to do, at least from our shikodachi position, so as I go straight toward camera here, in our shikodachi, because I'm in shikodachi with my feet here and my legs, there's not a lot of hip freedom available. If you go back to old videos of Master Toma, our founder, there's a great one of him doing Wansu in Las Vegas that Ronnie Nix just posted. But he'll get into his stance first and then throw, and it's more about very subtle movement here. But if you go back again to video number 3 on Koshi Gamaku, it has more to do with locking in the torso, so it's not floppy. The tension or contraction or muscular pressure, internal pressure I place here at the lock point allows the power to transfer from a very small movement of the hip, especially as I'm moving, a little sit, which then allows the shoulders and upper torso, that trunchial twist, to occur without a whole lot of overt hip, but mostly due to the locking in place of, so it's a shoulder throw, lock, but it all comes generated from moving into the stance, drop, sit the hip. As the hip drops, trunk locks, shoulders rotate, and that's where the hip movement comes from. Now another one we'll see is in Gedan Shitoge, which we have, for example, at the end of Pinyan Nidan, and in a variety of other places. Kusanku has it. As I sit into a cat stance, again, now I have a little more free hip movement this way. So as I'm pulling again with that counter rotation of my shoulders, then the hips sit, and that hip sitting into place initiates the kind of the slinky rotation of the hips. So I'm not just sitting here and moving my arms, but I'm allowing the glutes, the stance, to initiate that spiraling motion from the lower body into the upper body and then into the relaxed arms. The arms alone doing the movement is going to be weak. But you'll see a lot of martial artists do it when they don't focus on this. But sometimes the hip movement is a lot more subtle rather than this full shaking. Now we do this for training, obviously, to get used to it, but in application, if I'm moving quickly, that all happens as a, kind of like a, if you ever watch a dog shake water off, or even their tail wagging, if you watch a video of a dog's tail wagging in slow motion, it's not the tail moving, it's the body moving and then the tail just kind of follows where that whole spinal movement goes. So my spine connected through from the hips, the iliac sacrum connection, and that's sacro-lumbar sacro joint, sacro-lumbar joint begins a twisting in my spine that all starts from glute sit and rotate here. But again, it's not Kishabachi Kushorinryu, big overt. It's just the sitting corkscrewing down that initiates this, and the arms pretty much are just relaxed. If somebody grabs you by the gi or the throat and they start shaking you and you just relax your arms, you can whack them pretty hard. So I'm not stiff arming this. It's rotation and whipping. Same thing in Shiko, rotation and whipping from the upper body connection through the spine, hips, lumbar sacral joint, lumbar spine, up into the shoulders, rotating. So that's where the Gamaku Koshi connection in the Okinawan blocking comes. I hope that made some sort of sense. If you go back and watch the video number 3, look really closely at video 56 where the question was. Look then at what I'm showing here, kind of connect those dots, that it's 1, that happens first, 2, and then arm whip 3 completes the blocking motion. Hopefully that answered the question. I'll put a copy of this directly in as a reply to the comment to which I'm addressing the response, but hopefully that makes some sense for in general. And then the whole thing, when done quickly, again, if I'm in combatives, this either has to be my initial block as I settle in for a wizard and strike, as I've shown in some of the bunkai, Pinyan Shodan bunkai, for example, or the whole thing has to just be a forward throw, which Jody Pulse, my sensei, used to like to talk about. They just throw the hands forward. So if I'm doing this quickly, my hands just come up and forward. There's not a whole lot of time for this, but over practice of doing the large movements, when you do it small, it all becomes connected and a little more subtle and internal. So instead of rotating this far, the coil counterspring just quick snaps. And the arms still are getting the same relaxed push into place, but all of this is very small as opposed to how we might practice it in a larger motion. Okay? Thanks for asking the question. Hopefully that helps a little. If it's still confusing, we can continue the conversation.